A Saturday morning really is a morning for the bigger questions, isn't it? And Prince Harry's landmark settlement with Newsgroup newspapers over the allegations of unlawful intrusion, coupled with Hugh Grant's own long standing legal battles against the Murdoch empire, deserves time because I think we have to ask who is responsible. And, and with hindsight, we need to highlight these cases spanning decades that represent the deliberate misuse of power by powerful media conglomerates. The settlement amounts, the Harris reportedly eight figures or more settlement grants, settlement under duress in 2024, they illustrate the financial magnitude and the stakes that are being played in this story. But the broader issue is who knew in this culture of bullying, because that's in the end what it comes down to, isn't it? It's about a culture of bullying. So I find it very interesting. If you go back to the resignation of the editor of the Daily Mirror, the fellow who took over from Piers Morgan, and he used the Leveson inquiry as an opportunity to apologise about the Sven Goran Eriksson and Ulrika Johnson scoop, and he said that it's possible that came after phone hacking. He said he didn't personally know, but he said it was a possibility, and there was a fine line to be drawn. This is the same editor who dumped Christopher Hitchens and Dominic Midgley from the paper. And what he's doing is highlighting a culture of aggression and speed. To think of a metaphor, it's like going down the M1 at 100 miles an hour, careering down the road, and it's highly unlikely that the person driving would see all the damage done, let alone acknowledge it. But the damage is there. And that, I'm afraid, is the problem. It's not whether people knowingly did harm, but whether they did harm and harm was done under their watch. And I think ultimately it's about who is responsible for setting up this environment of abuse and bullying. And I think at that point we start looking at bosses. Grant's central argument that civil cases, while financially burdensome for claimants, fail to expose the structural failures and the individuals behind the scandals is reasonable. His call for a renewed criminal investigation, therefore, targeting executives like Rebecca Brooks and Will Lewis, who remain in positions of power despite overseeing operations during these alleged breaches, that is important. He raises the pressing question: who bears responsibility when institutions evade accountability through settlements? And his criticism of the UK's political and legal system is also valid. His admission of sympathy for politicians terrified of the Murdochs underlines the vast influence Rupert Murdoch's media empire wields over public perception and political decision-making. The Culture Secretary's refusal to open the Leveson inquiry is emblematic of this reluctance to challenge entrenched power structure. And the lively and often combative exchange between Hugh Grant and Piers Morgan makes for fascinating reading and listening. Piers Morgan, of course, has a vested interest in Newsgroup newspapers' defence, and that made him a vocal critic of Grant and of Prince Harry. Their spats on social media inject humour, and Morgan's accusations of hypocrisy, Grant's swift rebuttals, and the quip that his last Murdoch collaboration was in 1994. It doesn't matter when it was, he is covered in filth. He is soiled goods. And the feud reflects broader divisions in how press accountability is perceived and at what point are the people in charge held responsible for the actions of the newspapers and the harm that they did. I don't think when you look at Piers Morgan today, it's very difficult to see him as the bully, as the thug who was ordering phone tapping, if he did order phone tapping. But how did these stories emerge? He could say he didn't know. Maybe he didn't. But it was done on his watch, wasn't it? So there's a lot of things to prove here. First of all, people would have to prove, the law would have to prove that phone tapping was actually done on this person's watch or that person's watch. And then they'd have to prove that that person knew. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the approach is to go further back and to identify the source of this behaviour. And that's probably looking at Rupert Murdoch himself. The broader implications of Grant's demand for Leveson too, while is something to encourage. While the initial inquiry recommended sweeping reforms, many remain unimplemented, and the potential for a reinvigorated inquiry to address online journalism, modern media practices, areas overlooked in the original investigation, and sort out, okay, maybe it's academic to identify who was responsible, but it's not academic, and it's active, and it's about improving our standard of life to ensure that these standards in journalism are in place for the future. Why our standard of life? Because journalism isn't just about what the newspapers do, what the newspaper barons do, what the newspaper editors do. It's about what we read. It's about what we see. It's about what informs and guides our comprehension. Because whether we read or whether we just pick it up en route, we are all influenced by the journalism of the people like Piers Morgan, like Rebecca Brooks, who are guiding these organs of information. They're either organs of information or they're organs of filth. And organs of filth spewing into the ether are filling our lives. This is what we breathe. This is what we see. This is where we live. And for too long, we've been living in a sewer where we think that it is our right to know the filth that's covering other people. Well, the problem is that filth is everywhere. We need a clean-up. And the stakes for democracy and for public trust could not be higher. The revelations about unlawful press practices erode faith in both media and the institutions meant to regulate them, and that includes the law. So people, lawyers, barristers, lining their pockets with money out of the process of this business, they are as culpable and as filthy as the Murdochs appear to be. Grant's advocacy underscores this deeper need for the reform of our system, but not just one system, of the entire thing. Because you look around and you think, well, how is it that we've got to a point where all the institutions with which we have to interface in Britain seem to be more concerned with control than with custom care, than with getting on with the job. They're more concerned with this nasty edge, with this patronizing voice, with this idea that they know something you don't. Rather than producing that information, it's about withholding that information. This is all about the atmosphere set up by people like the Murdochs. by newspapers like the newspapers in the newsgroup newspapers. It's about the filth of the public life that we inhabit. So we need the deeper reform. We need a reform that balances press freedom with personal privacy. And the action inspired by Grant's plea, if democracy is to thrive, no institution, no matter how powerful, should be above accountability. And the accountability is not only somebody can be dragged into court, it's about fundamentally that people should be doing their job. People should be providing the service that they offer. So if you ring up the passport office, you should be able to get information. If you ring up the Home Office, if you ever had a number, you should be able to get information. If you contact your phone provider, you should be able to get information, the NHS. But you can't, because what you've got is this imperious wielding of control, the gatekeeper of power. It's about power, it's not about service. And a lot of that is about the way our news has been provided. This authority, as if you open the newspaper and it is correct, it is right. It is like opening the Bible. And it's all predicated on filth. This job, as Grant aptly puts it, is not done by any means. This job, there's a lot still to be done. There's a lot to be done to make our newspapers worthy of our country's history and reputation. Our newspapers need to lead our country in the direction of truth rather than in the direction of filth.